From inside the Banner offices along the Inner Harbor, it is the Banner Baseball live chat. Paul Mancano, I'm going to be joined by Danielle Allentuck in just a moment, but we have behind us the Orioles free agency bracket, which we are going to use to try to guess who the Orioles might sign this winter in free agency. Danielle, why don't you join me via similar to Chris Collinsworth, the Sunday Night Football slide-in. Thank you so much to everybody who's tuning in live on YouTube or after the fact. Please let us know what you think as we go along, because we want to hear from you. If we tie, or if we just cannot agree on who we think should move on, you're going to be the tiebreaker between the two of us. We have 32 names behind us, broken down by region, i.e. by position. We have starting pitchers in red. We have lefties in the top left here, righties in the bottom right. We have all of the position players just lumped into one category because, let's be honest, the Orioles need pitching more than they need position players. And then we have relievers in blue down at the bottom left.
Opposite.
Nope.
Yes.
Do I?
Relievers, position players.
Good call. Yep. Off to a great start here. Danielle, are you excited to break out the big board here, the free agency bracket?
I am excited.
Good.
Yeah.
We are going to be profiling all of these guys and discussing them in detail. And the purpose of this exercise, I want to make it clear, is not to go through these guys and determine who we want the Orioles to sign or who we think the Orioles should sign. It is simply to determine who we think the Orioles will sign of all of these guys. And so Blake Snell, probably not going to go very far in this board. Would he make a ton of sense for the Orioles? Absolutely. Let's be honest, he's going to cost way more than what the Orioles are going to offer him.
Right. And we both cover this team on a daily basis, and we have some sense of how the Orioles think. So we're going to use that thinking to determine who they will sign.
Exactly. Now, the reason I prioritize pitching on this board is because the Orioles could certainly use a number 1 or number 2 starter. There are a few on this board. There are also some guys that maybe fill out the bottom of the rotation. Position player wise, I tried to throw in a mix of DHs, infielders, outfielders to see, really who the Orioles could add to that stacked infield. And then relievers. Mike Elias said at the GM meetings that the Orioles are looking to add, a back end of the bullpen type guy. They're going to be without Felix Bautista. We have some closers in there. We have some middle relief in there as well. So a lot to be discussed here. Danielle, should we start with the left-handed starting pitchers?
Let's do it.
All right. We have in the top corner, the number 1 seed among the left-handed pitchers, James Paxton, going up against Blake Snell. Now, the reason I put Blake Snell as an 8 seed is because, let's be honest, Blake Snell is going to get a bag this winter. He's going to get a, 5 to 10 year deal worth at least $100 to $200 million. He's probably not going to be in the Orioles price range.
No, absolutely not. And if they do, we'll both eat our words. I would be shocked, honestly, if that happened, but it's not going to be Blake Snell.
So you got Paxton?
I do.
All right. I think Paxton is going to move on in this instance. Now, Paxton, not terrible last year for Boston. He has been riddled with injuries over the last 5 or so years. Last year with Boston, 7-5 record, a 4.50 ERA, averaged 9.5 strikeouts per 9. So the strikeouts were pretty nice. Only 19 starts, and he's 35 years old. But what did we see with the Orioles last year when they signed Kyle Gibson and Jordan Lyles the year before that? It's a guy who is nearing the end of his career. He's past his peak. They're probably not going to sign a guy for more than, a couple years, maybe 2-3 years at most. I feel like Paxton fits kind of right in that range for them. And if they were to sign James Paxton, I think a lot of Orioles fans would probably be underwhelmed. But he fits the profile of what Mike Elias would want, don't you think?
And he's also a guy who knows the AL East well. He played for Boston. He played for the Yankees. They need innings eaters, and he could be that guy.
He could. He's not an ace.
No.
But he could maybe fill in right behind Kyle Bradish. You never know.
Right.
All right, next up, Sean Manaea against Wade Miley, our good old friend Wade Miley. Sean Manaea signed a 1-year deal last year with the Giants, ended up opting out. And Wade Miley, another guy who's past his prime, had a good year, though, with Milwaukee last year, although he did suffer some injuries. There was a mutual option, I believe, in Milwaukee for him, and he hits the free agency market. What are you thinking?
I said Miley.
Okay.
Just because, again, he could be a short contract, fill a gap for a year. be depth. He's not going to be at the top of the rotation, but they do need that 4th, 5th, 6th starter type guy.
He made 23 starts last year. He's going to be 37 next year. That is up there, but probably going to sign a 1 or 2 year deal, you would think. Went 9-4 with a 3.14 ERA. So the numbers were still good.
Mm-hmm.
Orioles fans will not be pleased when they see Wade Miley if he signs with them, just because his one stint in Baltimore did not go well. They traded for him around the deadline. He only lasted a couple months in Baltimore and had an ERA well over 5. Did not make the postseason that year. So he is a better pitcher and has shown to be a better pitcher, I think, with a better coaching staff than the one they had in place back when he was traded for. I think he could do a whole lot better his second time around in Baltimore. But I agree. Let's put Wade Miley. Moving on. All right, next up, Eduardo Rodriguez. Probably a guy that a lot of Orioles fans want. Going up against Hyunjin Ryu. Now, Eduardo Rodriguez had a 3-year, $49 million option on the table to stay in Detroit. He chose not to take it. He's probably going to want more than that if he is opting out. He had an option last year to go to the Dodgers via trade at the trade deadline. He chose not to take it. Where would the Orioles fit in Eduardo Rodriguez's puzzle? Is there room for him to return home because he was a former Orioles farmhand?
I say yes, for a couple reasons. Number one, he did say, and we obviously don't know if it's true, if he wanted to stay in Detroit because of family reasons. He opted out, so that's obviously probably not the case anymore.
Yeah.
And he was on a team that, had no chance of making the playoffs. He's going to be looking to go to a team that has a chance to make a playoff.
You would hope. Yeah.
Do you get to the point now where you're like, okay, I'll sacrifice a little bit of money to have a chance to be in the playoffs for years to come? And I have to wonder and maybe believe he's at that point now.
He went 13-9 with a 3.30 ERA last year. Now he is one of the younger guys on this list. He's going to be 31 next year. How long-term of a deal could he be looking at? Because long-term stability for a guy who's 31 is going to be important here.
I would expect 4 years and maybe throw an option.
Michael Elias has never signed a player to a guaranteed contract of more than a year.
But he's never managed a team that's been in charge of a team that's gone to the playoffs before.
No,
so
this is true. If there is going to be a guy that you are going to, and if there is going to be an off season where you're going to spend on an external free agent, now would be the time. And I do think Eduardo Rodriguez could anchor your rotation for several years. You don't know the long-term future of John Means. He has certainly struggled with injuries the last few years. Right. Only has a couple more years under contract. You don't have too many great lefties in your system that you can really look down the line at and say, this guy is going to be in our rotation for years to come. DL Hall certainly looks more like a reliever right now. So if you're going to insert a lefty into your rotation, Eduardo Rodriguez could be that guy for you, and he could be a good number 2 behind Grayson Rodriguez in a year or two. Could be a number 2 behind Kyle Bradish maybe next year. I think if you're signing Eduardo Rodriguez, he might be your opening day starter, given the kind of contract that you might be shelling out for him.
Absolutely.
Do you think it's a more likely option than Hyunjin Ryu, who is nearing the end of his career?
I do, just because I think that you're at the point where I think the Orioles are going to take a chance on somebody this year, and they are going to spend money, and I think they're going to do it on a left-handed starter. I think of the bunch that's available, he is the most in their price range right now.
Yeah, Hyunjin Ryu is going to be 37 next year. Had a 3.46 ERA, but only made 11 starts, and I believe he was left off the wild card roster for Toronto as well in the postseason. So they didn't really, he was coming back from injury. They didn't really trust him to start a game in a crucial series like that. He did make a promise also that he was going to go back to the KBO and sign with them at the end of his career. At 37, it feels like that might be the time where he might head home. We've seen it happen in the past with other pitchers. I'm going to go Eduardo Rodriguez here, but I don't feel good about it. I'll be honest. He just feels a slight bit out of the Orioles price range. We are live on YouTube, so if you have your comments, please keep them coming, and please let us know how woefully wrong we are about all of these. We're moving along
with Paul, not me.
Just me. Danielle's always right. We are moving along here. That is, the handwriting. That's quite something there, Danielle. It goes off the line.
It's a long name.
It is a long name. Fair enough. I'm
going
to delete that and mess with it later.
Okay.
This is my beautiful bracket that I spent so long on last night.
He's really proud of it.
All right. Last up in the left-handed starting pitchers region, Martin Perez, Texas Rangers. Jordan Montgomery, also Texas Rangers. One guy had a great year. The other guy, not so much. Jordan Montgomery, of course, on a key piece of that Rangers team that won the World Series, pitched well against the Orioles in the playoffs. Martin Perez has been solid throughout his career. He's been about slightly above average pitcher throughout his career. He had a great year 2 years ago, and the Rangers got him back on the qualifying offer. Other than that, he's a guy that's going to give you about slight over 4 ERA. Jordan Montgomery has real ace upside.
See, this was a hard one for me because I think if they're going to sign one, I think top of the line starter and then one back of the end starter.
Right.
And I think this is a case where you have a top of the line starter versus a back end starter. So I don't know if Montgomery. The Orioles obviously watched him in the playoffs. I think he is going to cost more than Rodriguez, and I don't think they're going to sign both of them. So next round would be interesting. But I think for right now, I mean, they're going to go after a left-handed ace. Same reason as Rodriguez to me, where he is the more affordable of the left-handed aces right now.
Absolutely. The difference of Jordan Montgomery and some of the other top starters on this board, including Blake Snell, is Montgomery did not get the qualifying offer because he's not eligible to receive it because he changed teams in the middle of the season. So he would not come with draft pick compensation for the Orioles. I think that makes him slightly more likely to be signed.
Yes.
I just cannot see there are a few players hotter right now entering free agency than Jordan Montgomery. I just don't see them handing that big a deal to somebody like Montgomery, just knowing that you're going to have to give him at least 5 or 6 years, I think.
I mean, it's the same reasoning I had with Rodriguez, so that you're going to have to give a big deal to one of these pitchers.
Yeah.
And this is the year to do it. So if they don't do it, I know they don't do it, but I think they're going to make one big move of the offseason, and one of them is going to be it.
So you're going with
Jordan Montgomery.
All right. Let's bump him on.
You sure you're okay?
Move him up. Yeah, yeah.
He's very tentative.
I am very tentative. Just because Martin Perez last year, he ended up in the bullpen. He was not a starter for them the entire season because of the additions that they made at the trade deadline. He kind of got bumped out there. 10-4 with a 4.45 ERA, 35 games, only 20 of them starts. It just feels like one of those guys that Mike Elias is going to sign and say, we can fix him. There are changes that we can make here. We've seen him be good in the past. We saw him have a terrific all-star year back in 2022. We saw things there that we can tap back into. Similar with Kyle Gibson, who was also an all-star 2 years before the Orioles acquired him in 2021, had a down 2022, and the Orioles said there are things that we saw there that we can tap back into.
But they didn't.
They didn't. No, absolutely.
So I think you're beyond the point now where you're spending money on people you can fix.
That's fair.
I think that is where you go to the waiver claims and trades.
All right. Well, if it is Jordan Montgomery, I think Orioles fans will be pleased. Let's move over to relievers. First matchup, I have Jordan Hicks against Robert Stevenson. Jordan Hicks has been known probably since he was a rookie as having one of the best fastballs of all time. With the St. Louis Cardinals, he hits 105 on the radar gun. Robert Stevenson, a fascinating case. Somebody who was not very good throughout the course of his career, ERA around 5, traded midseason, and is able to tap into some things with the Rays. The Rays can do that with just about anybody. So there is some concern that that's just a Rays thing. And, the Orioles will not be able to recapture that. But I think some team is going to fall in love with Robert Stevenson, what they saw from him the last 2 months of the season, and say, we can make him a very effective, reliable reliever.
So this is an interesting one for me because I watched Robert Stevenson in Colorado when I covered the Rockies, which is where he started his career. And then I watched him in Tampa when he kind of revived his career. So for me, I mean, seeing the differences, and I mean, it's not just the altitude of Stevenson. I saw him on the road. He's a totally different pitcher now. I think he's probably pretty affordable. So I think if you're going for, you're not even taking a chance on him anymore because you've seen what he can do. I think he's probably like a $2-3 million pitcher. I think Hicks might be a little more. So if you're going for the cheaper option, I would go with Stevenson.
I'm not positive that he's going to be cheaper, only because I do think that some team is going to fall in love with him.
But it was only a couple months that people saw.
Oh,
he
absolutely.
doesn't have the career track record.
Absolutely. He did finish with a 3.10 ERA. The strikeout numbers were very high, 13.2 Ks per 9, whip under 0.9, 52 and 2/3 innings. And really only the last 20 or so of those were very good.
Yeah.
Are you picking Stevenson for the upset here?
I mean, I'm not against Hicks. I guess.
Yeah.
It's a hard one.
I could also see teams saying, because Hicks has always been known as somebody who has a great fastball, has a very high ceiling.
Yeah.
But the question is, can he be a reliable reliever consistently? Because he only has a career ERA around 3.50.
And the Orioles don't love taking chances on relievers. I mean,
True.
They don't. The guys who have high ceilings, I mean, they're very cautious with them.
They are.
And they don't always throw them out in those cases, as we saw in the playoffs.
Yeah. And I feel like they would rather take a swing on a guy with a high ceiling via waiver claim, than invest significantly in somewhat of a riskier proposition.
Agree.
All right. Stevenson. I'll move him on.
Okay. See his handwriting's better.
It's no contest. All right. Next up, Brent Suter, Hector Neris. Hector Neris had one of the better years of any reliever last year in 2023. 1.71 ERA. He was phenomenal. Brent Suter, lower ceiling. I think he's probably going to get a lower contract than Hector Neris in free agency.
I mean, I would like to say Neris. I mean, I think he could be a good guy for them. I think Brent Suter is a, for lack of better words, a personality hire. He is a phenomenal human being. He's in charge of the MLB PA committee. He just does 8,000 community service projects. He's beloved across the league. So if you're looking for that type of character, you go with Suter. But the Orioles don't really have a track record of just going for personality hires. So I'm going to say not him in this case.
I mean, they did partially sign Kyle Gibson because of his veteran presence. Right. Partially signed Adam Frazier because of his veteran presence.
But now you have veterans on your team.
Yes. Now
it's different.
There's certainly less of a need to add a reliable, coach in the dugout type of player.
Right.
And Brent Suter last year with Colorado, 3.38 ERA, 7 Ks per 9, 69 and a third innings pitched. He is a lefty. I do tend to think that, of the two of them, now Neris he is from Houston. He doesn't have the Elias connection there because Elias was long gone by the time that he joined that team. He was very reliable for the first 8 years of his career in Philadelphia, then spent a couple years in Houston. I think it's of the two of them, I would probably go Neris as well. And I think that's another guy that if you sign Hector Neris this offseason, I think Orioles fans would be pretty excited by a signing of that length and quality of player. I could see it being 2 years, 20 million, 15 million, maybe.
Yeah, agree.
He's nearing the end of his career, but the career year that he had last year, I think he's looking to kind of cash in on that.
Agree.
All right, Hector Neris, moving on. Do you want to preview our next matchup?
Sure. Next up, we have, I don't have it written down, so you are actually blocking me. We have Matt Moore and Kenyon Middleton.
This one is interesting. Matt Moore reinvented his career over the last couple of years, was kind of a failed starter, goes overseas. He comes back and is used exclusively as a reliever in 2022 and is phenomenal. He, I think, is probably closer to a middle reliever, probably closer to a 6th, 7th, maybe 8th inning guy. Keenan Middleton was traded for last year by the Yankees. I think he's probably closer to an end of game type guy, 7, 8, 9. Of the two of them, who do you see the Orioles signing?
I like Middleton. He is going to be a first-time free agent, so that definitely changes things a little bit. He was in the AL East for a little bit there, so he understands Orioles. And I think you take a chance on a guy like that who could fill that late role for you. I mean, there's not very many options out there who can do that, and he's one of the cheaper options who could do that.
Yeah, Matt Moore last year finished the year with a 2.56 ERA, 10 strikeouts per 9. In 52 and 2/3 innings. Keenan Middleton, a 3.38 ERA, 11 strikeouts per 9 in 50 innings. He's 30 years old, so he's probably going to want to sign something of at least a couple years. I'll go Middleton here as well. I think that I think he is probably a bigger swing than Matt Moore at this point.
Agree.
Right. Keenan Middleton moves on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what they need right now. Is they need to get a couple cheap options to fill the end of the bullpen.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to be without Felix Bautista for the entire season. Who knows if Yennier Cano can repeat the kind of
Mhm.
success that he had this past year?
Yeah.
He's going to be relied on heavily, and just having somebody to throw out there to take
Mhm.
some high pressure situations off of him, I think would be big.
Right.
All right, final matchup of the relievers. We are only doing the round of 32 today of these guys, and to make it clear for those who are just joining the live stream, these are the guys we think the Orioles will sign, could sign, not the players that we think they should sign.
Mhm.
Final matchup here: Wandy Peralta against Ryan Stanek. Who do you have?
This was a hard one too. I'm gonna think just clearly by a price standpoint.
Okay. Wandy Peralta last year with the Yankees was pretty solid. Had an ERA right around 3.30. Ryan Stanek last year with Houston, not as good. 4.10 or 4.09 ERA, 9 Ks per 9, 50 and 2/3 innings. I think he kind of got overlooked because of the other quality relievers that Houston has in that bullpen. This one to me is a little bit of a toss-up, and I think it could come down to just kind of what the O's are looking for, because Stanek is a righty, Peralta is a lefty. Who are you going with?
I'm a Stanek.
Okay.
And I think like in this case, neither of them are going to be a back end reliever. You do need a quality setup guy. You can never have too many of those.
Okay. All right, Stanek moves on.
All right.
Do you want to introduce the position players?
Sure. Moving on to position players. First up, we have Kiki Hernandez and Jorge Soler.
All right, so Soler was a late addition to this bracket. Now, I think Kike, the biggest thing that he brings to the table is his positional versatility. Mm-hmm. There isn't a position on the diamond that he cannot play other than catcher. He has played every single, he's even had an inning pitched in his career. He can play every position. The question is, what kind of value does he bring at the plate at this point in his career? Because he had an OPS under 700 last year with Boston, went back to LA, and maybe it was the warm weather, maybe it was the coaching staff that he was familiar with, but he played a lot better with the Dodgers last year. So Soler is interesting because he can still play a corner outfield to some extent, but also primarily a DH at this point in his career. Do you think the Orioles are more likely to go with a versatile, somebody that they can throw out there at any position, but probably won't bring a whole lot offensively? Or are they more likely to sign a bigger bat, but somebody who is much less versatile defensively?
So I went with Kiki for this one because I feel like they don't need a DH right now. They have enough options. Orioles like throwing Adley out as a DH and Daisy's not catcher. They have the platoon at first base of Ryan O'Hearn and Ryan Mountcastle. I don't really feel like they need a guy who's just a DH unless you're going to make room elsewhere.
Yeah, and Jorge Soler did have an opt-out that he took with Miami worth $9 million. I think it ended up with incentives being about $13 million. So he's going to want more than that. And when you have the number of DH options that you have, you mentioned Adley Rutschman, they will have probably Heston Kjerstad on this roster, if not opening day early. And they like him as a left-handed option off the bench. They don't really trust him too much defensively just yet. So he's going to DH a lot of games. They have Ryan O'Hearn. They got more production out of their DH last year than any other position on the diamond. I'm going to go with Kike as well. Okay. I think the question also will become what this team, if they are to get somebody as versatile defensively as Kike Hernandez, what does that say for the future of Jorge Mateo? But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
We also may find out on Friday at the non-tender deadline.
We might as well. That'll be a fascinating thing to follow on the BaltimoreBanner.com, where you can sign up for $1 for 6 months. Next up in our position players portion of the bracket, Jock Peterson against Isaiah Kiner-Falefa. Jock Peterson last year agreed to the qualifying offer from San Francisco. He has tremendous power. It didn't really show last year. He was in the 20s in terms of home runs. All of his StatCast numbers were phenomenal. Exit velo, barrel percentage. He was phenomenal statistically from that end, but it just did not lead to a whole lot of homers. The Orioles love their left-handed hitters. Will they be intrigued enough by Jock Peterson to hand him a contract that he's probably going to command this winter?
I don't know. I don't see them wanting to give a guy a big contract to somebody who didn't have the production last year. I mean, if they're going out and signing a bat, they want a guy who can hit 30 plus home runs, not somebody who is coming off a so-so year. So this one is, a bit of a toss-up for me because I think he may command more money than they want to spend on an outfielder right now.
Yeah, Jock Peterson kind of feels similar to the, where Joey Gallo was at this point last year because, great power potential, but has not been consistently great offensively at the plate. And his average of 235 last year is a little bit concerning. And the 15 homers a little bit concerning in 121 games last year. The other thing is Jock Peterson was primarily a DH last year. And I do still think he can play the outfield defensively, but he's not going to play center.
No.
And Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, defense is going to be what he brings to the table if you're signing him.
And that's what the Orioles need right now is they need a defensive outfielder who can play all three spots.
Right. All right. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, he's moving on. I think that's a much lower swing than what the Orioles could go with. But at the same time, they're in a position right now where they don't need to take a big swing on somebody because if you sign Jock Peterson, he's probably going to want everyday playing time. I don't know exactly where that would come.
No.
Probably would have to be DH, and it would come at the expense of Adley or Ryan.
And I don't think you spend a lot of money on a bench player.
No. All right. Next up, veteran outfielder Jason Heyward against veteran infielder Whit Merrifield. Heyward revived his career last year. He was looking like he was close to retirement in his last year with Chicago. Played less than 50 games in his last year with Chicago. The Dodgers saw something they liked in him. They used him primarily against righties because he is a very powerful left-handed hitter. He still does have great defensive chops in center, can still play that position at a very high level. He hurt the Orioles when the Dodgers came to Camden Yards in the middle of the season. And then Whit Merrifield on the other side kind of reminds me of a right-handed Adam Frazier. He's going to hit for contact. He's never going to hit more than 15 home runs, maybe 20 in a season at most. That left field wall is going to look a whole lot farther for somebody like Whit Merrifield than part of the attractiveness of Adam Frazier last year was the fact that he was a lefty. And we saw him hit a career high in terms of home runs. Who do you think of these two guys would you rather have?
I say Heyward because you don't need another infielder.
Fair.
And him and Hyde go way back. They were in Chicago together. And I think that, those connections play a big part. Hyde always says how close he was with those 2016, 2015 Cubs teams. Heyward was part of that. And I think it would be, a nice reunion for both of them.
I tend to agree. And I do think Heyward would probably get a similar deal that the one he got last year, maybe a little bit more because he proved more.
Right.
But he's closer to the end. Whit Merrifield, this is probably his last opportunity to really cash in.
Right.
Because he hasn't had that yet. Merrifield also, for a guy who is not going to hit a whole lot of home runs, his defense is probably going to continue to decline. And like you said, you have Jordan Westbrook, who now has proven that he can be at least a role player on this team going forward at second base, at third base, and he can play shortstop, which Merrifield can't.
A number of guys coming up in the minors who are way cheaper.
Let's move Heyward on. I tend to agree with the logic there, and I think the Orioles will probably be less likely to sign somebody like Heyward because they needed Adam Frazier at this point last year. I don't think they need Merrifield.
No.
All right, final one for the position players on our free agency bracket. Adam Duvall against Tommy Pham. Two outfielders. Tommy Pham, a guy that has played on just about every team, it feels like, in baseball. He's a phenomenal immaculate grid contestant. Adam Duvall had a solid year last year after signing, I believe, a one-year contract last offseason. Depends on what the Orioles' flavor is going to be. I don't think they're dying for an outfielder.
No.
But I think one of these two guys on a 1 or maybe at most 2-year deal, I think could fit in the Orioles' price range.
I'm going to go with Pham.
Okay.
Because he's coming off he was just on Arizona after the trade deadline. He didn't win a World Series, went to World Series,
yeah.
The Orioles are always looking for cheap guys who have that playoff experience. Because, even though most of the clubhouse does now, they have 3 games, not that many. Pham's been around the league. He is, we talked about personality hire earlier. He is a personality hire. And I think in this case, that may be okay. So I would go Pham. I think he would still be relatively cheap and affordable for them.
And he is 35 years old, going to be 35 next year, I believe. 36 next year, 16 homers. He's going to give you pretty much the same stat line every season.
Right.
Duvall, 35 next year, 247 average, 21 homers. an 834 OPS is pretty nice as well. They're both right-handed hitters, so no difference there. It's a toss-up for me. You went with Pham. I can't help but agree.
Okay.
Tommy Pham moves on. I don't think the Orioles are signing either of them, to be honest, but we had to give them some representation here on the free agency bracket, where we are live on YouTube, and we have one more category, one more region to go through. We're just doing the round of 32 today. Next week, we will be doing the Sweet 16 and eventually get to our champion. We have here the right-handed starting pitchers that the Orioles might sign. Absent from this list is one Aaron Nola. I think he's going to be a little bit out of the Orioles' price range.
Just a tad bit, yeah.
I think of all the free agents out there, I think the guys who have the highest likelihood to sign massive contracts are probably Blake Snell, Aaron Nola. That's just about it. So I did not include him here. I know some fans will probably be frustrated by that, but they're not signing Aaron Nola. Hate to break it to you, especially because he received a qualifying offer. All right, first matchup. Kenta Maeda, quality veteran, would pitch for the Twins last year against Michael Wacha. Who do you got?
So Maeda concerned me a little bit with his innings last year, and I think that the Orioles, have learned from going for a guy who didn't pitch a lot of innings the year before, and it didn't necessarily work out great this year. Most of their starters this year hit their innings limits, and then you saw them waver off. So for that reason alone, I'm going to go with Wacha.
Yeah, Maeda, 4.23 ERA, just 21 games, 20 starts. He struggled with injuries as well. He's 35 years old. And the question is, when you hit 35 and you're hitting a lot of injuries, whether that becomes a long-term issue going forward. And then Michael Wacha on the other side of things signed kind of an interesting contract with San Diego where there was a club option, then a player option. Both of those sides ended up declining. 32 years old, 3.22 ERA last year. He's a higher upside swing at this point in his career than Kenta Maeda. You went with Wacha?
I did.
I think Wacha is going to cost more. That being said, if the Orioles are going to sign a starting pitcher that they feel like can be closer to the top of the rotation, Wacha makes more sense.
Agree. Yes.
All right, Wacha moves on.
Yeah.
Sonny Gray and Frankie Montas. Who do you got for this one?
So for this one, I went Gray just because Montas had a shoulder injury. And I think if you're going to spend money on somebody, you don't spend money on somebody who was injured for most of last year.
Fair enough. Montas pitched one game at the end of the season. Very frustrating for Yankees front office, for Yankees fans, because they traded for him at the deadline back in 2022. He wasn't great down the stretch that season, and then, pitches the one game this season in a frustrating year for the Yankees. I think there's a lot of chatter about him going back to the Yankees too, because I think Brian Cashman wants to show, look, this trade wasn't a complete disaster. We can, we can still work with him. I think he's probably going to have to sign, though, a 1-year prove-it deal.
Yes. And it's going to be cheap. And maybe that's what the Orioles need here. But I just don't see the Orioles taking a chance on a guy who, I think you would have to throw for scouts or something for the Orioles to have to be like, okay, he's truly healthy now.
Yes. Yeah. And the Orioles are not in a spot where they want to be giving somebody $10 million or more and not get anything in return for those guys.
Right.
I think nothing frustrated Michael Elias more than not getting, nearly enough innings from Michael Givens last year.
Oh, the 4 weren't enough for $5 million?
Not quite enough. And especially with the ERA that he had for those 4 games. I think that, if they're going to be spending money, they want a sure thing.
Yes.
And I do think Frankie Montas, while it would be kind of intriguing, it would be fun to follow and would be a high upside swing, maybe has still near the top of the rotation stuff. I do think Sonny Gray makes a lot more sense. And Sonny Gray, though, credit to him because he has had some great years in his career, had another great year last year with Minnesota. There were questions about, whether he could handle the spotlight when he was in New York. Baltimore is not a huge market. I think he will be perfectly fine, pitching in this ballpark in front of these fans. And I think he's another great clubhouse guy that I think Orioles fans would like.
Agree, yes.
All right. Sonny Gray moves on. Next up, Seth Lugo and Lucas Giolito.
For me, this one was neither of them are going to be your ace. So you're looking at it as a back end of your rotation type of guy. So I'm going with Giolito because he pitched 184 innings last year. And it was across 3 teams, but that is very impressive. The Orioles love their Jordan Lyles Kyle Gibson type guy who can come in, fill the end of the rotation, and just pitch his arm off and not get injured and be that guy they can rely on. And to me, Giolito is that guy.
Giolito, the concern for me would be that he did pitch worse and worse in each new location.
True. Yes.
He started out pretty solid with Chicago, ends up getting traded to the Angels, pitches like 4 starts for them before he ends up being DFA'd and going to Cleveland. I think an optimist would look at that and say he was going through a lot of change. And in a contract year, he's being thrown in a lot of different situations.
But you can't use that excuse.
No, absolutely.
He's a Major League Baseball player.
Yeah, he's got to be able to, to pitch well. And that is certainly concerning that he ended the season with not great statistics, 4.88 ERA. The strikeouts are always high, but, 8-15 record, nothing to write home about.
No.
But the consistency of being on the mound for as many starts as possible, really since he was traded to Chicago, he has been very healthy and available for the White Sox and then the last 2 teams.
Yeah.
Seth Lugo is interesting because he is a converted reliever.
Right.
And like you said, that inning limit, the Orioles are incredibly careful about their innings with their starting pitchers. And that may lead them to say, okay, maybe if we do sign Seth Lugo, we keep him on a strict innings limit for the season. And that could really hamper them.
And I just don't know why you would do that when you have other pitchers who are already on innings limits.
Yeah. All right. Fair enough. Giolito.
Yes.
Moves on.
All right.
Final matchup. Michael Lorenzen, Luis Severino.
All right. So this one for me is going for Lorenzen because the Orioles played the Yankees multiple times here, obviously, but they played Severino twice in like a 2-week span. He gave up 16 earned runs in 6 innings pitched. And
it was one of those starts was right after the trade deadline. And my gosh, that was just a sign of what was to come for the Yankees.
But things never really got better for him.
No.
I don't think you're looking at a guy like him to sign him for a rebound deal. I don't think the Orioles need that. I don't think that's their place where they can afford that right now.
Yeah.
So I just don't think he is the right fit for this team.
The only way I could see them bringing in Severino would be on a very close to major league minimum contract.
But I think he could go to a worse-off team and get a couple million.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think, and we saw a report earlier in the offseason that like 8 teams were interested in Severino, which seemed like pure agent messaging. Because boy, did he have an absolutely nightmarish season last year for the Yankees. That being said, if the market under him completely collapses, I don't think it would be the worst thing in the world to at least bring him in. But certainly don't guarantee him a spot in the rotation.
No,
because you cannot afford to be, throwing out at that below average a pitcher to start the year. We saw it last year with Cole Irvin, crushed in his first 3 starts. Orioles said, we don't have time for this. Your option down to AAA.
I could even wonder if the market gets really bad for him, bringing him in on a minor league deal.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That to me would be a low, a high upside, low risk.
Yeah. I would be very fine with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Michael Lorenzen on the other side, we know what he is at this point. He's going to give you innings. He's going to give you solid, not excellent, not ace production. He had, some highs this year. He was an all-star for the first time. He threw a no-hitter in Philadelphia. But then at the end of the year, he wasn't starting in the playoffs. You know, he is not going to be somebody who is going to be relied upon that heavily. Maybe he's starting in the playoffs for the Orioles if they sign him, but probably not. They would probably have, if everybody's healthy, 3 better options. You'd still rather have, Bradish, Rodriguez, and Means if they're all healthy. So Lorenzen will help you get through the regular season, but that's probably the ceiling for him.
Right. Which is fine to have. It's fine to have a guy like that.
They were also linked to him via national reports at the deadline. So they clearly have some interest in him. I do have Lorenzen here as well. I think he's another guy that Orioles fans would be nonplussed about if they were to sign, because he is not going to start on opening day, and he's probably not going to start the second game of the season. But I think he's much more likely at this point than Luis Severino. All right.
Put him on the board.
All right. Who do we have rounding out our round of 32 now into our Sweet 16? Why don't you run through the left-handed pitcher?
All right. So this was the first one we did, if you're just tuning in.
Oh, boy. It's on rollers, Danielle. Just be careful.
We have James Paxton, Ray Miley, Eduardo Rodriguez, and Jordan Montgomery moving on.
And then for the Position players, which we lumped into one catch-all category. We have Kike Hernandez beating out Jorge Soler, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, Jason Hayward, and Tommy Pham. And then over on the relievers side, Robert Stevenson pulling off the upset over Jordan Hicks, Hector Neris beating Brent Suter, Keenan Middleton over Matt Moore, and Ryan Stanek over Wandy Peralta. And finally, for our right-handed starters, Michael Wacha beating Kenta Maeda, Sonny Gray beating Frankie Montas, Lucas Giolito beating Seth Lugo, and Michael Lorenzen beating Luis Severino. How do you feel about this Sweet 16, Danielle?
I feel pretty good. Couple tough matchups. I mean, Rodriguez versus Montgomery stands out to me. That one's going to be hard for me.
Yeah. Of all of the players on this board left, is there one guy that you think is the overwhelming favorite to win the whole thing?
I think it's too early. I think we have some more upsets to come.
Okay, fair enough. I think the reason I had to split starting pitchers into right-handed and left-handed is just because the Orioles are. I can almost guarantee that the Orioles are going to sign a starting pitcher this winter.
It just depends on if it's an ace or a back end.
Exactly.
Yes.
And it could be, they sign, Lorenzen as a back end in trade for Corbin Burns or somebody like that.
Agree, yeah.
They could blow their whole budget on Jordan Montgomery and then trade for a back end guy. We shall see. It's going to be fascinating to watch, and we will keep this going as we go throughout the offseason. Sweet 16 coming next week. Thank you to everybody for following along as well on YouTube. And Danielle, where can the good people find you on Twitter?
D_Allentuck.
I am at Paul Mancano and at All Banner Sports. Thanks so much for following along, and we will be back with the Sweet 16 next week.